Your Eminence, Grand Chancellor Cardinal Schönborn, dear Bishop Kung, dear Abbot Henkel Donnersmarck, dear General Secretary Šipka, Your Excellency Ambassador Nať, dear Rector Klausnitzer, dear board members, dear Outgoing Rector Dr. Geusau, dear Dean Dr. Dolna, dear faculty and staff, dear students and guests. It is a real honor to address you this evening and on behalf of the student body to express our gratitude to the outgoing rector, Dr. Christiaan Alting von Geusau, for many years of his service at the ITI Catholic University. Let me share with you one particular experience with Dr. Geusau when I saw his deep personal engagement as the rector of the ITI during the pandemic COVID-19. I admit that the topic of pandemic is not the most pleasant one for a speech. However, it was in my first year of studies at the ITI when this health crisis began and affected everyone. Many were infected, and unfortunately, some also died. It was during this difficult time when our beloved professor and a friend of deceased Pope Benedict, Dr. Danny Kiergaard, departed from us for the house of the Father. I cannot underline enough that it was the time of suffering for all of us. As Dr. Geusau is also a lawyer, let me add also a short legal remark. During the pandemic, we witnessed how our earthly rulers often failed in dealing with the pandemic. On the one hand, it is understandable that some measures had to be introduced to protect public health. On the other hand, these measures often disproportionately violated the rights and freedoms of citizens, including the rights of the Catholic Church. For example, in my homeland Slovakia, the faithful were even prohibited to approach a priest on an individual basis with a request for a confession or the Holy Communion, despite respecting all protective measures. Let me add that it was while supermarkets were fully crowded and the government said that supermarkets provide essential needs. So in this line of thought, the administration of the sacraments is apparently not an essential need for man. This might be only a tip of an iceberg, but it clearly shows that the governmental policies and legislation introduced did not respect human nature in its fullness and were not measured by right reason and the eternal law. And we know from St. Thomas Aquinas that if human law contradicts common good or divine good, or an authority acts beyond power committed to him, such human law is no law at all, but rather an act of violence. Without justice, what else is the state but a great band of robbers? St. Augustine said. Thus, what remains is legal positivism when the only measure of goodness or badness of the law is the legislator himself. Pope Benedict warned us of the danger of legal positivism in his speech to the Bundestag in 2011. He said, quote, "Where positivist reason considers itself the only sufficient culture and banishes all other cultural realities to the status of subcultures, it diminishes man. Indeed, it threatens his humanity. I say this with Europe specifically in mind, where there are concerted efforts to recognize only positivism as a common culture and a common basis for lawmaking, reducing all the other insights and values of our culture to the level of subculture, with the result that Europe, vis-à-vis other cultures of the world, is left in a state of culturelessness, and at the same time, extremist and radical movements emerge to fill the vacuum." End of quote. Dr. Geusau knows these principles very well, and he teaches them in his course on Foundations of Law and Justice. Had the politicians known these principles and acted accordingly, the pandemic crisis might have been managed very differently the polarization of the society could have been not so severe, and our physical and mental health could have been in a better condition. On the contrary, these negative effects were not experienced as much at the ITI, also thanks to Dr. Geusau. He saw that some governmental measures were too restrictive and even unjust. Therefore, he tried to persuade legislators to change their mind and to keep the life at the ITI as normal as possible. In fact, while students at other universities spend many months behind their screens studying online, the ITI students, not long after the outbreak of the pandemic, could again have classes in person. Additionally, we were even able to celebrate liturgy together and lead a bit more normal social life than the rest of the society. Those who stayed at the ITI were far better off. I would even say we were privileged. Truly, the ITI was like an oasis of normality, common sense, and freedom amid a desert of chaos and restrictions. Dr. Geusau, as the rector of the ITI, played a very important role and greatly contributed to the common good of our community in this difficult time. Thank you very much, Dr. Geusau, for fighting for us. In the end of... Yes. In the end of my speech, on behalf of all the students, I would like to cordially thank you, Dr. Geusau, for 10 years of your service as Vice President for Development and later for 9 years as the Rector of the ITI. I wish you that the Holy Spirit may lead you on the right path in future. Thank you very much, thank you very much, Dr. Geusau. God bless you. Thank you.